Well, Rundle Mall is about to get a facelift. A Victorian-based company has been given the go-ahead to knock down the Scarfe building and several others to make way for a 19-storey tower block. Despite requests for interviews with both the developer and the state government, no one would talk to State Line in favour of the project. Its detractors argue the makeover will destroy not only a bit of history, but also any chance of Adelaide ever emulating Melbourne's laneways.
When are you gonna come down? When are you going to land?
Demolition and new developments have left Rundle Mall looking very different to what it did only a few decades ago. But the face of the city's major shopping strip is about to get another makeover, with plans to develop the Scarfe site.
So goodbye, yellow brick road, where the dogs of society howl.
I think the precinct would lose a lot of its intimacy and it would lose a lot of its adventure for shoppers because the scale of that building is reduced to a personal level, whereas the buildings that have been erected in the mall, the department stores that are erected in the mall presently, I think have lost a lot of that personal touch with their sheer walls and their blank facades.
The proposal would see about 2 acres of buildings between Rundle Mall and Grenfell Street demolished, including the 1920s Scarfe building and some smaller buildings that date back to the 1800s. They'll be replaced with a 19-storey retail and office tower. David Beaumont is on the State Council of the National Trust. He says elements of the buildings should be retained, as has been done with the East End markets, which are now pubs, shops, cafes and apartments.
So Leah, this is a prime example of the fact that we shouldn't be embarrassed by building remnants, and we should use them to our own advantage as reminders and signposts of where we've come from as part of our history, and we should be able to incorporate them without embarrassment into a new development. This was the remnants of the East End market, one of the cool rooms of the stores in the East End market, and it's been adaptively reused.
The Adelaide City Council owns the Scarfe car park and basement, land that's crucial to the development. Because of that conflict of interest, the council left the decision to the state government's independent statutory body, the Development Assessment Commission, which gave the developers the all clear. Ralph Clark from the City Council would like to see the buildings retained. He says the Scarfe building should have been protected when it was proposed for heritage listing in the early 90s, but that didn't happen.
Sadly, because the previous Adelaide City Councils, for whatever their reasons, have chosen not to pursue, in particular, compulsory heritage listing of worthwhile buildings. That's something which this council is currently dealing with, and during the course of this year and into 2010 there'll be lots of discussion and public debate on those buildings that are identified by the council for local heritage listing. The precinct master plan, which has been signed off by the City Council some years ago.
Ralph Clark says it's not only the old buildings on Rundle Mall that will be lost in the development. He says Francis Street and Lindy's Lane don't look much at the moment, but the old brick and bluestone walls could be turned into interesting spots, much like Melbourne's celebrated laneways full of cafes, bars and boutiques.
And if you look on the outside of the building, it is looking pretty dated. And
Ralph Clark says Rundle Mall has already lost several important buildings, most significantly the Myer building. He says the North Terrace facades were saved, and the same could be done with the Scarfe building.
If the North Terrace aspect of the Myer Centre did not still have that facade, those historic buildings' facades retained, it would look a bit like Disneyland. And this would be smack bang in the middle of our cultural boulevard, from King William Street in particular down to Hackney Road. We don't want to make that mistake again in losing the Myer Centre facade in Rundle Mall with respect to the Scarfe site, if we can avoid it at all.
While the Development Assessment Commission has given the plan the all clear, the City Council still does have some negotiating power. It could refuse to lease the land it owns, scuttling the developer's plans.
I think the council's in a position where it should be able to negotiate with the developer to retain something and give something back to the City of Adelaide. You must remember that this is a major development. The development proposal I've seen doesn't contribute anything of the existing structure and history back to the City of Adelaide, because that's what the mall is about. It's got intimacy, it's got interest, it's got a sense of discovery, and the new development appears to me to have nothing of that.
Ralph Clark says the council has offered the developer a significant amount of money towards retaining those part of the buildings that have heritage interest, but so far that offer has been rejected. He says he's not sure the council will stand in the developer's way.
That would be a drastic step, and it's something which wouldn't be entered into lightly by the council members. We've got to weigh up that the building is not heritage listed. That's sad. It should have been listed back in when it was identified as a building worthy of heritage listing back in 1992, but we can't turn the clock back.
Stateline requested an interview with the Urban Planning Minister Paul Holloway. A spokesman for the minister declined, saying the umpire has spoken on the issue. The Lord Mayor Michael Harbison declined an interview, saying it is a confidential property matter. The Melbourne-based developer, the Gandel Group, says it's not in a position to discuss the development, but David Beaumont says he hopes the developer will be in a position to listen to the community on the issue.
We possibly need to get petitions going. We possibly need to have some appreciation of what this building really represents for Adelaide, some of its history. We need to protect those things and make them interesting so people will go off Rundle Mall and find interesting retail areas. The National Trust is all about retaining interest, retaining history, not losing the things that make the city vibrant.